Houston, say again, please.
Houston, we've had a problem.
Hey there folks, welcome ye all to yet another Friday vlog of mine. Flaggins up to you all. If you don't have a flagon, go and get one right now and join me in a toast, people. Flaggins up to you all. These vlogs are, they're clocking up for 2020 already, people. Now you'll notice the beard's gone, so we won't have any more beard conversations. I'm sure that will cheer up about, 90% of the viewers. It got so annoying, I had to shave it off. I think what it is, I got to a point where I liked the length, and then because it doesn't grow evenly, and it got too long at the front, I didn't know how to maintain it, and I didn't have the tools to maintain it, and I was like, it's going. It was just so annoying. So maybe next Christmas I'll try again. You can look forward to a yearly Christmas update about my new beard, people, every year. So it's a Steve thing. It must be a Santa Claus thing. I don't know what's going on, people. But anyway, the delay season has hit us, people, so we're going to be talking about that. But first, we are going to be talking about about what I've been playing. And I mentioned it in the last vlog. I was playing Red Dead Redemption 2, I think, because I'd come off the tail end of Jedi Fallen Order. Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, and I loved it so much, and then it's always that sort of, what the hell am I going to play now that's going to fill that void, even though I've got a gazillion games that I haven't played. And Red Dead kind of dropped into that hole because Aaron Brew, my son, had bought me it for Christmas, and I thought, all right, I'll crack into that. And I will get into it, but I enjoyed, I think I mentioned in the previous vlog that I'm sure I did. I mentioned that the opener was just like blew my mind away. I could be wrong, actually. Maybe it was after that. But the opening sequence was just absolutely awesome, and I was getting really, really into it. And the minute it opened up, things were not quite as... So let's talk about that. Flaggins up once again. I'm going to have a sip of this before we get going. Oh, that's good, people. Oh, that's good. It's cold and it's beer and it's lovely. So, yes, so that's exactly what happened. So I got out of I did that whole opening sequence, and I stopped when I got to the first camp, the first major camp. Or I don't know if there's more camps, but that's the camp I'm at. And then there was some side mission bits, which I did. And then at some point, so I stopped at the camp after the first playthrough, and I was really buzzing to get back into it. But then I came back to it on was it yesterday, day before? I think it was day before yesterday. It was Wednesday. I thought, right, I'll give it another good crack now. And I just like the minute, because I thought I know what I'll do, because now I've done a few side quests, I've opened up the town, and I'll start wondering about the map and see what's going on and all that malarkey. And there's several issues I've got with the game. Now, I totally understand why people love Grand Theft Auto. I totally understand why Red Dead Redemption 1 was really popular. And I adored that game. I loved it. And yet, the frustrations I have with this game didn't seem to be not as heavily in Red Dead Redemption 1. And yet, Red Dead Redemption was like, oh, it's going to win Game of the Year. It didn't. It lost out to God of War in the end. Rightly so, because God of War was so different. But, the more I played Red Dead Redemption, the more frustrated I got with the mechanics of the game. It was so clumsy, and just walking around was so annoying, because they're forcing you to walk at like the slowest pace I've ever seen in any game whatsoever. Forcing you to take in this beautiful environment that they've created. Like, it's ruining the game. Like, I don't want to walk that slowly. And so you've only got two modes of walking in a normal area, right? You can speed up your walk in a camp reasonably, but outside of a camp, in a normal town or environment, you can only walk or run really fast. It's like, so you can either walk deadly slow or run everywhere like a complete nutter, and it's like, fine, but I don't want to play the game running around like a nutter or really, really slowly. I just want a reasonable speed that I can make my character move around. And outside of that, there was also just the general mechanics of like, I mean, it felt like it was the same sort of radial menu that they'd given us in the first one, but it's not sinking in with me on this one at all, to the point, I mean, I'm getting it, but I'm just not finding it smooth transitioning whatsoever. It's just like, oh, I mean, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of good in that game. There's a lot of things that you know. I mean, I love the fact that you can mess around with the horse saddle and all that. You know, manipulate and customize things the way that you want. And it is one of the best looking games I've ever seen. Hands down, gorgeous. The environments are incredible. The horse riding is great. All that sort of, you know, there are bits of it that are fantastic. But it's become, to me, it's just become unplayable because I'm getting zero joy out of wandering around with that character. I don't want to explore in that fashion. Like, I want to explore like a normal bloody third person game would normally let me explore at a reasonable jogging type pace where I can take things in, move around at a decent pace, see what's going on. And, you know, it doesn't seem to highlight things on the map like the old one did either. So when, like, someone will cry out for help and it doesn't actually identify them on the map the minute you've come close to them, which I think the old one did. I'm sure it did. And it put a question mark on the map or something. This one doesn't. So you're literally like, you're looking around everywhere like, where the feck is this person? You know what I mean? And there's all sorts of little things. I went into a hotel room. I paid for a hotel room so that I could sleep in this town because I was sick of it. I wanted to get off it. And I just wanted to save it. And I realised that you can save with the bonfires and stuff. But I was inside. I just wanted to save in the hotel. So I forget what the was Strawberry. I made it all the way to Strawberry on the horse. This was me wandering around the place for the whole map for about 2 or 2.5 hours. Got to Strawberry and went into this hotel room, and I could not get. I could get wardrobe, I could get search drawers, I could get all sorts of options to pop up on the screen, but I could not get sleep. It's like, and I had to force my character into the very corner of where the bed met the wall before I got the Y button or whatever it was to let me sleep in the bed. And it was like, it just sort of highlighted a whole like bunch of stuff that was frustrating me for the whole night. It's just not like I didn't have any of these gripes with the original wasn't. I'm not saying it wasn't clumsy, but it wasn't anywhere near as clumsy as that at all. You know, I did struggle at the beginning of the first one to get used to how the character, you know, made around. The character didn't walk anywhere near that slowly, and you didn't have to sprint about the place. You could walk around at a reasonable pace. I'm sure you could. And I played that recently because it hit back compat, and I tried it out again, and I didn't find any of those frustrations with the first one. So for me, I'm sorry, Rockstar, it's just not like that mechanic. Whatever you've done to it, you need to sort it out because it's not pleasant to play. The game's gorgeous, you know, it looks amazing, and it's probably the best thing I've seen on the Xbox One X as an open world, certainly. And, you know, that just sucks all the fun out of it, that. I don't know why I've not seen anyone else grumbling about it, but, oh, it's painful, people. Absolutely painful. Just like, I mean, I guess I didn't spot it when I was in the sort of linear story bit at the beginning. I guess it didn't really, because you're just so caught up in what's going on in the story, and, you know, you're just told to do stuff, you go off and do it, you come back. The other thing was, but the minute you opened the game up, it just became not very pleasant at all. And you know, I don't even know if I'll go back to it. It's like, certainly not at the minute. And I ended up throwing in Resi 2 again because I still haven't finished it. And I started a new play with Claire on Resi 2. I've only just done the beginning section, but yeah, I'm stoked for Resi 3 coming out, and I want to finish Resi 2 before it hits. And the reason I've not finished it is because I was recording it for the channel, and I wanted to finish that on the channel, which I may well still do, to be fair. But I didn't want to jump back into the game at the point I was on that playthrough because it was really advanced, you know, in the story. I don't think I was that far from the end, to be fair. And I didn't want to jump in because I'd forgotten what all the bloody buttons were. So I thought, well, if I start one, I can at least get used to it again, and then maybe jump back into the Let's Play. It wasn't a very popular Let's Play, to be fair, because, you know, my channel is more RPG than anything else. But terrific. It was a beautiful game, that. Absolutely beautiful. So anyway, I think Red Dead Redemption is literally Red Dead to me. Should rename it Red Dead to me. You keep the 2 as a number. Anyway, let me know in the comments below if you completely disagree with what I'm saying, but I'm absolutely bamboozled as to how I've not seen other people kicking off about how awkward that game is to play. Even if it's solely about I could live with all the little bits of clumsiness, to be honest with you, if I could just move my character around in that game in a sensible way and make it fun for me to explore this beautiful world that we've created. But it was so painful. It's just like, oh God. I was just happy to turn it off in the end. So I don't know what that's all about. I don't remember that with GTA. I don't remember that with Red Dead 1 to that extent. I mean, I adored Red Dead 1. You know, I had to be in the right frame of mind for a Western game, and eventually when I did play Red Dead 1, it was much later in the day when it had been out for years by the time I played it, and I just fell in love with it. It was gorgeous, and I remember wandering around that world so much. It was just brilliant. And, you know, the different areas in Red Dead 2 are incredible. You know, it really does open up a whole... I'm sure there's probably a desert section in it as well, but it opens up the whole... Everything I've seen so far is pretty vegetated. And, you know, you end up in the swamplands as well, where you've got all the alligators and all that malarkey going on. So the different environments were fantastic. I just wish I could enjoy it with some kind of, you know, some sort of character movement that was fun to use. So... yeah, I don't know. There was another point I was going to make, and it's completely gone out of my head now. But, yeah, I mean, it was just like, I just kept thinking, come on, when's it going to kick in that I get it, or it's not going to bother me anymore about this character moving like this, and it just didn't. It just didn't. So, anyway, I don't know what's going to go on with that game. I think I'm definitely moving on to other things. So I started Resi 2. I've had this massive want to play Days Gone, but... another game that I started and never finished and just started from the beginning. But there's a big part of me that doesn't want to do... I mean, I'll do the last... Excuse me, good grief. That's not very professional, people. Live. Well, you know. I'll play The Last of Us Part 2 on the PlayStation 4 because I won't be able to wait, you know, until the PS5 before I play it. Because it will be on that as well, or you'll be able to play the PS4 version on it. But there's really nothing like drawing me toward playing the PS4 at the minute, because I'm just loving being on the Xbox One X so much. So I'm kind of like, I'm not overly sure that I'm going to do anything on the PlayStation 4 again until such time as the PS5 comes along, and I'll trade it in. And then if the PS5 is... because I'll get both consoles, we all know that, people. I'll get both anyway. But at this point in time, it will take something pretty snazzy and nice for me to come away from Xbox, because I'll be getting whatever the top end Xbox Series X is. So if there isn't an equivalent on the PlayStation, I'll be sticking with that for all of my cross-platform games. And so the PlayStation 5 will become an exclusive console for me for the exclusives they do. So I'm at a point where I'm like, am I actually going to play this PlayStation again? Because I'm thinking, like, all the things that I want to replay, I think I'd rather wait for the PS5 if they're going to be playable on it, and get everything milked out of those games that I can get, and have them playing on hopefully a quieter machine as well. So yeah, so that's where I'm at with the gaming side of it at the minute. I'm just really frustrated that I couldn't enjoy Red Dead Redemption the way I wanted to, and you know, maybe I'll get some sort of want to go back and try it again from where I've just saved it, but there's nothing wanting me to put that game back on at the minute. I'm just really frustrated with it. So there you are. So that's what I've been up to game wise, and I'll probably hopefully keep the buzz up for Resi 2 to get back into that. I mean, I put that game on and I was just like, God, I forgot how good looking this game is. It's just so good, and it's in 60 frames per second, Resi 2 as well. Which is just, you know, the next gen consoles are going to give us minimum of 60 frames per second so far as what we're being told. Certainly the Xbox Series X is. And that's just going to be a delight for me. I mean, I've said a million times I will take frames per second. I will take 60 frames per second on 1080p before I'll take 4K or 8K. Because 1080p is bloody gorgeous, even on a 4K telly. I'd rather have 60 frames per 60 frames per second with no drops at 1080p than have a game struggling in 4K, you know, dropping below that, or even worse, current gen dropping below 30. Like, give me 1080p at a solid 60, and I'd be well happy with that. But these new consoles will most likely be capable of much, much more. But what they tend to do is they tend to try and squeeze the 4K 60 frames out. It would be nice to have an option just to say, like, I'm not bothered about the 4K. Just give me a little bit of a better play experience if I drop it to 1080p. Let me play it on 1080p with 60 frames per second. But that option certainly, or similar options haven't been there on this gen. There's not been a similar... most of them have tried to just stick at 30 frames per second and get 4K out of it. But none of them have really given you a choice to say, well, just give me 1080p and get my frame rates not struggling at 30. Because they will drop below 30 if they try to do 4K. So just give me 1080p and let it go up the way, but never down the way sort of thing. Also, I've always been curious as to why it's got to be such a massive jump. Like, why do we have to have 30 frames per second or 60 frames per second? Why can't we have 40 or 50 frames per second? You know what I mean? It's like, why has there got to be this jump of 30? There was no in between. Like, even when the Pro and the Xbox One X came out, it's like, well, don't push for 60 then. If you're struggling, just give us 40 or 50 frames per second. But it seems to be, if they're going to have it locked, it has to be 30 or 60. They'll give you a variable on the odd occasion. They'll give you where it's a variable frame rate. You can put a variable frame rate setting on, which usually doesn't work very well, and it will just bounce all over the place depending on how much it can do at the time. But yeah, I don't understand. There must be some sort of technical reason as to why they don't say, right, the next time we do it, we're going to aim for 40 or 50 frames per second. It's got to be 30 or 60. Maybe someone knows the answer to that. In the comments below, let me know. People, let me know. So, what else do we have to talk about? I have a list here, people. So I've only jotted 3 of these games down, but the delays in games are coming thick and fast now, and it's not that we're surprised about it. I'm not surprised about it at all. I'm surprised a little bit, only because of the new gen consoles coming out toward the end of the year. So pretty much all of these are getting pushed back to a point where the month after there's going to be the launch of a console. It's like, well, we've pushed it, but let's go through them, right? Let's go through them. We'll go through the ones that I've jotted down. So Final Fantasy VII was due in March and it's now in April, so that's not a huge jump. They just wanted an extra month to smooth things over. That's absolutely fine. I think we all agree that's just fine. But I'm pretty sure that game was delayed already. Was that not supposed to come to us at the end of last year? I'm waiting for you to answer. Or is it just an excuse for a drink? So Final Fantasy VII, delayed from March to April. I think it's was March the 10th to April the 3rd, or was it March the 3rd to April the 10th, something like that. And Marvel Avengers has been, not that I would play Marvel Avengers, but Marvel Avengers has been delayed from May to September. And then Cyberpunk has been delayed from April to September. And those 2 games are... I'm pretty sure there was another one as well, which I'm forgetting about. But anyone pushing a game back to... I'm not bothered about any of those delays because I'm not excited about Cyberpunk because it's not my type of game. I'm not excited for Marvel Avengers because I don't think I'll play that game. I've watched the Avengers movies and I've liked them, but I'm not like a massive Avengers lover or anything. I'm not got any great... I wouldn't have asked... If someone had said, what game would you want a developer to make for you, it would never have been an Avengers game in a million years, so I'm not that bothered about an Avengers game. Final Fantasy VII is the one that I would love to play, but I've got this thing in my head, because they're not making one game that's a remake of the original, they're making 3 games that are a remake of the original. So, and I understand that they've broken it into 3 parts and they've expanded every area. I get that. But there's a part of me that thinks, well, I love Final Fantasy games, but I'm not, I haven't played Final Fantasy 15 all the way through. Is it 15? The newest one? I've still not played that game all the way through. And for some, even when I did play it, it didn't feel like a Final Fantasy game that I recall. Like, the whole battle mechanics have all changed. Like, it doesn't feel like the way that Final Fantasy games used to play. And that Final Fantasy game looks like it actually is more like Final Fantasy 15 than it is like the battle system anyway. Like, it is the ones that I actually adored. I've said this a lot like my favourite battle mechanic was 13, Final Fantasy 13's battle mechanic. Because much as though Final Fantasy 10 is probably the one that I'll always adore the most because of my memories playing it with Aaron as a kid. And the time that we spent playing that game was just immense. And it's just got a very special place in my heart, that game. That one and 9. And even 8 to some extent. But 9, 10 definitely 9 and 10. But 10's always going to be the one that stands out. 10 still had that thing where you couldn't run 5 yards without a fight breaking out. You know, whereas Final Fantasy 13 sort of gave you the ability to spot an area where there was enemies and go and fight them if you wanted to, or try and work your way around without having to fight if you really wanted to. So it kind of opened that up. It made exploration a little bit more fun. It also introduced a way of quick fighting and mixing the paragrams together and all that sort of thing. Was it paragrams? I can't remember. And it was just, for me, a really fun mechanic to use. And when that went back compat, and I did a few episodes on the channel, I would happily have carried on playing that playthrough, to be honest with you, because I was having so much fun with it. I just adore that. I'm not saying it's the best story, I'm not saying it's the best characters, but I actually love the characters in that game. The story, for me, the story was actually quite good. And I think at the time it got a really hard time because it was on 2 discs, if I remember, originally, and the first disc, it was all really linear, like it didn't open up much, and you had to get to near the last quarter of the game before it opened up into this open world. And a lot of Final Fantasy fans want an open world experience. But for me, you know, the original Final Fantasies, like Final Fantasy 7 and stuff, I mean, they were limited to what they could do anyway, so I'm not sure there was that much of a wondering about, but anyway. But yeah, so I mean, for me, that battle mechanic with Final Fantasy VII would have been perfect. But that is not what we've got, because if you look at the gameplay clips of the guy running around, I'm forgetting his name now, but the guy running around with the sword, I was going to say Tidus, but he's from 10. I know it's Tidus. Everybody calls him Tidus, and I call him Tidus, but I don't care. I'm right, and everyone else is wrong. So. Yeah, so I know it's not going to be that, which is a bit disappointing, really. I don't know that there was never another Final Fantasy that got a mechanic similar to 13, to be fair, because after 13 there was an online one, which was 14, and then there was 15, which completely changed it altogether. So, I mean, it was, from what I played of 15, it was fun enough. It didn't... There's a reason people fell in love with Final Fantasy, and a lot of it had to do with the turn-based battle systems and stuff, and the way that they worked. And I'm not sure that they kind of get that when they're making the games now. Obviously, the key guy that made the ones that we all love and stuff isn't there anymore, is he? And doesn't make them anymore. But you know, it's like, I had this conversation the other night. It's like, why is it so difficult for developers and people involved in game companies to look at the ones that were the most famous and popular? It's the same with Resi, and make something that emulates that. Not copy it, just emulate what the bits that people loved. Put a little bit of a stamp on it yourself, fine. But if you move away from all the things that people loved about those games, I mean, what is the point of making a Resident Evil game like Resi 6, and even Resi 5 to some degree, where there's no puzzle element whatsoever to the game, when 50% of the fun of Resident Evil games were puzzle? It was a puzzle-based game based in a horror environment. That was what it was, Resident Evil. You know, you could have taken that 50% of puzzle and put it to any environment, but we all loved it because it was set in that horror element. And yet, the only way that we've got back to that is by them remaking Resident Evil 2. Well, they remade Resident Evil 1, although just Resident Evil, but they did that in the same format, so it wasn't like remade. It was almost, it was a bit more like playing a remaster, wasn't it? But the same game mechanic was in that one, where you're sort of, you're not over the shoulder and stuff. You're still walking around like you did in the old game. Resident Evil 2 was a complete remake where it's over the shoulder. They've reworked a little bit, but all those puzzly bits are back in there, and it's a puzzle game with the horror elements now really, really cool. Resident Evil 3, we know it's on the way. Is that March? I think it's March, isn't it? But that's on its way, and they've done exactly the same thing with that. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll get a Code Veronica X, and that'll probably put an end to it, I would think. But I'd be really disappointed if we don't get a Code Veronica X on that as well. But why is it so difficult for them to look at those games and say, right, well, we'll make a new story now based around some of these characters. We'll pick and choose whichever. You want to introduce a new character, that's absolutely fine. But get it right, and then all give us a new game with the puzzle elements put back in, just like these ones. I don't understand why that's so difficult to do. You know, finding all the bits to get you through that door, to get you through that section, to get you through. You've got to work your way around the area. I mean, for me, I understand that creating puzzles and stuff isn't something I could do off the top of my head. I mean, you know, but they've got people that are paid a lot of money to come up with this shit. You know what I mean? It's not that hard, is it? So it's going to be interesting to see what they do, because it went from, well, the last one we had was was Resident Evil 7, and Resident Evil 7 went right to the horror of right to the horror, right to the core of horror, as opposed to the horror of horror, right to the core of horror again, and it did have puzzle elements in it. It did start introducing them. I mean, you had to get through one bit to find a bit to put in the other bit to get through that door to unlock a chain to get an item. So those, yeah. Now that I'm about to say it didn't have as much in the puzzle element, but it was heavily introduced that you had to work your way through those areas to find certain items that would then get you through another door to get you through another area to find another item and blah blah blah. But it was done in first person and stuff, so although it did feel like a Resi game to some degree, it wasn't 100% Resi for me because it was in first person. But it was a great game. I finished that game actually. Me and Ambry played it together when he came down at one point, and we took turns on the old controller. And yeah, I mean, I actually thought that was a really good game. If they could come up with another concept for Resident Evil 8, give me Code Veronica X first though. And then do Resident Evil 8 as the same kind of thing for that, then I would love it if they could start bringing them back to third person, but bring that 50% puzzle element back into the horror side, because it's not about. It isn't. I mean, they know now. They know because Resident Evil 7 has kind of shown it. But even Resident Evil 7 got a bit actiony in places. Because it's not about the action. It's about the horror surprises. It's about, trying to put down a really horrible enemy when you've only got a limited amount of resources and stuff like that. It's not about being surrounded by 100 enemies or shooting loads of zombies. It's just about dealing with what's in that corridor at that one moment in time with what resources you've got left, and then your puzzle bits as well. Because the whole point of walking down that corridor is to find the element that's going to get you through another section that's back there, because you need the part that's in there. So, and it's the same, back to Final Fantasy, it's exactly the same thing. It's like, look at what was fantastic about 10, look at what was fantastic about 9 or 7. Fans have been telling you for years what they adored and loved about those games. So, for me, you can introduce your own stamp on something without ripping something apart and making it something that's never going to be as loved as came before. So anyway, I'm not particularly fussed about the delays that much, because Final Fantasy VII for me, but I'm still in a position where I think, well, if I waited until all 3 of those games had come out, because there's going to be 3 of them to. I mean, I don't, because at the minute it's just called Final Fantasy VII Remake, I think. So what's the second one going to be called? Final Fantasy VII Remake 2. What's that all about? They should have called it Part 1, Part 2, Part 3. But I think they were reluctant to do it because people will be like, well, I'm going to wait then. Because people are going to be a bit. I suppose someone who's never played Final Fantasy VII before probably isn't going to be bothered. Final Fantasy VII is an old game now, so your younger players aren't going to be that fussed, are they? But it's a bit odd. I don't mind that they've done that, but, I'm more than happy to wait 3-4 years and play them all back to back if I'm going to play Final Fantasy VII. So I'm not overly bothered that it's been delayed. I mean, there'll probably come a point where I'll see it at 20 quid and think, well, I might as well buy it. Whether it will sit on a shelf for a year or whether it will sit on a shelf for 3 years until the other 2 come out, I've no idea. I don't know what the timescale is for the others. I mean, it's taken it's probably been a couple of years, isn't it, since they announced that they were going to do it. And they've probably used the Final Fantasy 15 engine, so, you know. Well, I'm enjoying that tonight. Well, I don't think there was a huge amount else to talk about, people. We've only just hit that half-hour mark, you know what I mean? And to be honest with you, I nearly didn't do a vlog tonight because I was like, actually, I don't know that I've got anything gaming-wise to talk about. But then I was like, oh, well, I can talk about, you know, Red Dead 2 experience, and then I remembered about all the delays and stuff. Console-wise, there's always stuff dropping on YouTube, but there's not been anything that's been... Oh, here's one, actually. No, there is one. Here's one that I haven't written down on my list. I've just remembered now. So... not Phil Spencer, but there's another guy who's in charge of some top section of Xbox. Is he in charge of the game studios or something? I can't remember. But he basically turned around and said, wait, it turned around. He just said it. Turn around. He said that all of the games for the first 2 years that the Xbox Series X is out will be playable on, or there'll be a version of them on the old console. I mean, we are used to that, right? But he's saying all of the first party ones. I'm not sure about the third party, but all of the first party ones, because they don't have any control over the third party ones, but the first party ones are all going to be playable on the Xbox One, which is a bit concerning because, like, there's a lot of resources you can tap into on a new console that an old console's never going to be able to do. So that kind of makes you feel like, well, are you actually sucking all the resources out of that thing, or are you limiting what you're doing simply so you can stick it on the old console? And one prime example is Halo 6, because like Halo really should be... I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's a way that they just scale it right down to some ridiculous, 720p... 20 frames per second horrible version. But the Xbox original, even the S to some degree, but the original certainly, that they really struggle with the games that are coming out now, never mind stuff that's going to be for next gen. I know for a fact that Jedi Fallen Order doesn't play very well on any version of Xbox other than the X. So, I kind of get it for the Xbox One X. Xbox One X will probably handle some of those games all right, but it concerns me that people are going to be buying games that were made for the new gen, but there's also a shittier version for the old gen that are going to get not a very nice experience out of those games. But it's going to be interesting to see. That basically means there's going to be nothing coming out for the Xbox Series X from their home studios that won't be playable also on the Xbox One X. And that boggles my mind a little bit. It concerns me more than anything else. But I think the ones that play on the new gens will be fine. They'll play well enough. I just hope it hasn't limited them. If you're going to soak up all the power of the new one and make it everything it can be, you don't want to be thinking about last gen. You know what I mean? But you always get cross-gen games. I mean, Assassin's Creed Black Flag, that was a cross one, wasn't it? There's an example. And it played fine on both, but it was never a spectacular-looking game, and I think that could have been a spectacular-looking game. It was good-looking, and it was better-looking on the PS4 than it was on the... what was I on at that point in time? Well, I didn't actually play it on the old consoles, but it would have been on PS3 and Xbox 360. And I remember seeing footage of it, and it was a lot better looking on the new gen consoles. But if you hadn't been concerned about the old ones, you could have made it so much more. And you can tell that from when you look at Assassin's Creed Origins or Assassin's Creed Odyssey. What was the other one called? Yeah, Odyssey, I think. If you look at those games and compare them to Black Flag, I mean, it's a monumental difference of graphics. So, yeah, let me know in the comments below what you think of that news, because, it's all very well being new console is backward compatible, but new games backward compatible? Not sure that's a good idea, to be honest with you. Not a good idea. But anyway, it won't take away from the fact that playing the third-party stuff on the new Xbox is going to be awesome, and it won't take away from the fact that their home product will probably still look great and play great. It just takes away from the fact that could it have been more? Really, So it's going to be really interesting to see what PlayStation do. There's still massive rumours that they're going to be releasing a PS5 that is capable of playing PS1, PS2, PS3, PS4 and the new PS5 games. I mean, that would be incredible. Because I've still got all my... I'm sorry, I might have said this in my last one, but this last vlog. But I've still got, like... I rebuilt a library of PS2 games and I have a PS2 Slim. I've still got my PS3 and I've got a massive amount of PS3 games. And obviously I've now got a massive collection of PS4 games. So I mean that'd be amazing if they can do that. Absolutely brilliant. And then at that point I can probably dump the old consoles. But it's a big ask, and I think in order to achieve that, they'd most certainly have to have a console that's got mini consoles inside it, which is pretty much what they did with the original PS3 being able to play PS2s, although they phased it out. They basically had a separate little bit of hardware inside the box that just pretended to be a PS2. So yeah, if that's the way they get around it, absolutely fine. I have no problem with it. But to have a console out there that would just bring all that together for me would be amazing. Because my PS3 is out at the minute because I did a little bit of game playing on it to look back at things. It'd be nice to put that away, really. Yeah, it's also going to be interesting to see how Nintendo now will move forward, because though the Switch has been amazingly popular and is still really popular, it does have to progress in its hardware capability, because it is still suffering, for me, it's still suffering from a restriction of power, because it can't keep up with what devs want to do in its current state. And we're about to move to another generation of consoles. They have to come up with some sort of pro version of that, or more powerful version of that. It's never that size of thing's never going to play like the other two do. I mean, it might even, I don't know. I mean, it might even be worth having a base unit that can actually increase the power rather than just sit there as a docking station. But yeah, that console has never. I mean, I've not touched that Nintendo Switch that I've got for such a long time, and it's always because even with Zelda, I just felt like it was a bit sticky, like it didn't play smoothly on the big screen, and the frames per second were not good on that game. It was a pretty game, and it probably plays fine in the handheld mode, but I like playing on the big screen. I don't play on handheld, so I'd love to see a proper powerful Nintendo console again. I really would. I know the Switch is all good and well, but I'd just love to see them get into the mix with it. But I don't think it'll ever happen. I think they know what their niche is. I think they want to be the portable gamer. I think they know that people will buy a Switch as well as everything else. Aaron Brew, my son, his go-to console is the Switch. He will take that over the other two every day of the week, and he's a big Sony fan. Well, he's not got an Xbox One X anyway. But he's a big Sony fan, loves the PlayStation 4, loves the PS3. But, if he had to choose between those consoles, he would take the Switch, guaranteed, every day of the week. So, I think it's a lot of my personal preference in that. But that has to start stepping up, though, power-wise, because that's never going to keep up. We're still suffering of that. So I was going to say earlier, that is still suffering from, they're still cutting down games made ages ago to bring them onto the... It's like we're celebrating putting really old games on the Switch all of a sudden. It's like... But nothing amazingly new is happening outside of their own first-party stuff. There's been a few games. There was the Starfighter one. Can't remember what it's called. Starfield? Star something. It was a bit like... Star Fox, wasn't it? Can't remember what it was called. Those characters were in it, actually, if you got the Nintendo version. In fact, that wasn't even specifically for that, because it was on PlayStation as well. Anyway, for me, that has to start stepping up, because it launched and it was already a weaker power than the two that we had. So they're about to move on to a new generation. What's the Switch going to do? It's got to double its power at least. That said, I mean, they've put The Witcher on it. It doesn't play very well. I mean... It's clear that developers want to develop for the Switch. They absolutely do. And I think all of the Nintendo fans want the back catalogue available on the Switch, which I don't know how they'll ever make that happen. There's so many games. But I think we'll see a lot of that going forward. I think we'll probably see it trailing behind hardware-wise from the other two by far, but they'll continue to try and bring the back catalogue into, or remakes of the back catalogue into the Switch. Things like Ocarina of Time maybe will come around, and other Zelda games, stuff like that will keep people wanting to go back to it. So it's a different animal, I guess, but it's just a bit disappointing that they don't do. For me, like they were always able to sell. Like, I guess the question is there even room for a third console on the market? But I think there is. I think there'd be plenty of Nintendo fans out there that would go straight to Nintendo as their main console if it could do cross-platform gaming and stuff, if it kept up with the other two, and maybe tie that in with a Switch that can work with it. Because they clearly have the 3DS market anyway. The 3DS, I think they're going to phase out because the Switch is now portable anyway. So why not have a Switch and have something that either makes it more Uber when you plug it in, or a separate console that it works with that people can invest in if they really want to. Because if you're asking people, or if you're expecting people that will say, well, they'll buy a Switch anyway, even if they've got a PlayStation or even if they've got an Xbox. Well, why don't you make a console that people could buy as well as the Switch then? If we're going to buy both, then, fine. But give me a Nintendo one that's as powerful as the other two, that can play the cross-platform stuff, that heavily. It gives me some sort of multipath onto the Switch if I want to play it on the Switch, stuff like that. I mean, that would be a massive boon, wouldn't it? If they had a console that was as powerful as the other two, and if you bought it for that console, it also played on the Switch. I mean, that'd be awesome. Hey, put me in charge. Hey, none of this bloody Reggie and bloody Boomer, whatever his name is. What's his name? Bowser. Hey, look at that. I've managed to talk about, crazy stuff that I didn't even know I was going to talk about for another 15 minutes nearly. Well, let me know in the comments below what you think of all of that. I mean, at first, I was an N64 player before I was a PlayStation 1 player. And I adored the PlayStation 1 when I finally bought one, but I there were frustrations with the N64 with the cartridge being kind of limited. Like if you played the same football game, for example, like Pro Ev or FIFA. Oh, I think it was Pro Ev back then that I was playing. But anyway, Pro Ev on that and Pro Ev on a PlayStation. The commentator would speak the players' names on the PlayStation, whereas on the cartridge version he didn't say them. So you get the same commentary, but it wasn't as refined, and it was almost like they were limited for space because the disc could hold more than the cartridge. But it was a fantastic. I loved that N64. That was the Ocarina of Time. Really, really fond memories of that. The controller, I'm not a massive fan of the controller with all the plastic sticks and buttons. It was a bit sore on the old thumbs. So controller-wise, we've moved on a lot. But the Nintendo Switch Pro controller might well be my favourite controller of the three. But I still think the Xbox One X or Xbox One controller, the newest version of it, is the best controller at the minute. It's the most robust. Batteries last for such a long time. From what we've seen of the new one, it's got the share button on it, so that's going to take that out of the equation. I've said it, and I've said it a million times, I'll say it again. If they could just shorten those sticks on it just a little bit, that would be my ideal controller. Or give me a way of changing the sticks. I know you can do it on the Pro controller, but I don't want to buy a Pro controller with all these bloody fiddly bits on it. I just want the option to buy a version of that controller that's got slightly shorter things. And they've got the studio, haven't they, where you can kind of colour them in and everything. Like, can you not just give me another option that says, give me the one with the shorter sticks? I mean, that'd be amazing. That would be my perfect controller, actually, if they could do that. I mean, I think I don't know. I think PlayStation needs to have a little thing. The PS4 controller is fine, but it's not very robust. The sticks they're not as nice to use as the PlayStation, as the Xbox. I find my fingers slipping off them when they get hot and a bit clammy. And they're not, they hurt my thumbs after a while as well with that rim on them. I mean, it's way better than PlayStation 3 for general gameplays and stuff, but it's outside. The PlayStation 3 had a really good battery life, though. I mean, I could charge a PlayStation 3 controller. It lasts me bloody weeks. Playing 10 hours a day. But I think they'll refine that controller just a little bit. I don't think they'll change the shape of it overly much. I think the sticks might change a little bit on the new one. I'm not sure. I guess they might stick with that touchpad, but do we even use it anymore? Other than a giant menu button? I don't remember many games asking me to move that around. The little speaker on it I do like, with the noise when you get like audio logs talking out of that instead of the screen. It really brings the game out at you. It's a really simple and clever idea. And there's a lot of good in the controller. I just think it needs refined more. But Xbox put a lot of work into refining that controller for Xbox One. They did a really good job with it. Anyway, I'm rambling on, people, just because I can. Flaggers up to you all once again. I mean, I've loved every minute of that. I hope you have too. Well, there you are. That's all I have to talk about. I'm not remembering anything else that I've forgotten about on my list. Pretty sure we got through it all. Yeah, I mean, it was just that whole. It was that whole thing about putting games back to the month before consoles come out. Yeah, that was another thing I was going to mention, actually, because it crossed my mind. Like, why would you? I mean, I guess they've got no choice. If they need the extra time, they need the extra time. But I think there's going to be a suffering there, because people are now like, you're going to be people that are hardcore gamers are already thinking, right, I'm saving up for my console now. So why are they going to go out and buy a game that's been pushed back to September? When it's like, well, I'll get my new console and I'll buy a new game for that. If we've got the backward compliance side, then that's fine, which we do on the Xbox. We're still waiting for clarification on the PS5. Then I guess people might go for those games. But if there are launch games that are only for those consoles, and only launched at the time of those consoles. Let's say Halo 6, for example, launches, but it's only launched for the Xbox Series X at that particular moment in time, and will come onto the Xbox One standard later in 2 months' time or something. PS5, I don't think PS5 aren't going to touch new games going on a PS4 for me. I think they'll have exclusives for PS5. So I think the backward compat will save them. I just think they'll be to some degree, but I think it's a dangerous business having a game launching the month before a new console's launching, because people are so unsure about well, they're already going to be forking out massive amounts of money for a console. So, especially those titles, like no one's going to be going out of the way to buy that Marvel game, are they? Maybe it's just me. I mean, the Marvel movies have made billions, but I don't know if people will be going out of the way to buy that on the eve of a new console launching. And Final Fantasy 7 as well, that's April, so that's not September. What was the other one? Cyberpunk. I think Cyberpunk will be okay, because I think Cyberpunk will be patched anyway. If it's not patched, there'll be a completely separate version for it for the PS5 and the Xbox Series X anyway. And that's going to be another interesting thing as well, because are they going to make... If I buy I don't think they'll be releasing in that month of September a PS5 version of Cyberpunk or a PS5 version of what was the other one? God's sake, Steve, your brain. Cyberpunk and it was Marvels. Yeah, Marvels. I don't think there'll be a PS5 and Xbox Series X versions of those titles. Certainly not at that point, because they're not going to be buyable then, because the console won't be out and you can't really buy games for the console until it comes out. So is it just simply going to be that those games are getting launched? They'll forever be PS4 and Xbox One X games, but they will be playable on the new gen? Or will they actually produce a PS5 buyable version or an Xbox Series X buyable version of that game? For me, the simplest way to do that is to always keep those games as the previous gen's version and just have a patch that makes it play better on the new gen. But because of what Xbox have just said, that's going to be complicated, because you're going to have a separate version, certainly the first party titles, that's going to play on each. So you're going to have a separate one. So I don't know how that's going to work. PS5 will be simple enough. I think PS5... I don't know, people. I'm starting to ramble into places that I've got no business being. Like, you know, there's so many thoughts coming in my head just talking about it. Like, what are they going to do with Last of Us 2? Last of Us 2 is going to come out. Last of Us Part 2 is going to come out, you know, a few months before that. But will there then be a PS5 version of that game? Or will it simply be patched to be better playable on the PS5? You know, the way last gen worked, it was just remaster after remaster, wasn't it? To make it look better and play better on the new consoles. I don't think I can't see why we would get that. Because it's so easy for them to patch games now, it's almost like there would just be a patch that would, if you're on the PS5, you'd get a patch that would allow that game to play more spectacularly. That would make more sense to me than asking people to buy a game all over again. But from a business perspective, they want every opportunity to make people buy a game again. But why would you? Why would you buy... I was about to say, why would I buy The Last of Us Part 2 on a PS4 and then buy it all over again on a PS5? But I guess I did it with PS3 and PS4. So, but that was a monumental difference, though. You know, PS3 to PS4 was like that game. I mean, it wasn't even that wasn't a remake. It was just a remaster. But I still bought it twice, even though it was the same game to play again. But it had all its own trophies and stuff, didn't it? That's the other thing. Yeah, it's really confusing as to what they're going to do this time around. For me, it's simpler just to leave them where they are and give us a patch that makes them just play a bit smoother on the new gen. Because I don't see any reason for remasters on this new gen. Games already look bloody amazing. So I would argue that everything that is released before that month just stays as a backward compatible game if they give us full backward compatible on both consoles. But anyway, we shall see what happens, people. We shall see what happens. You see, I was ready to finish at half an hour and we've got up to 50 minutes. I apologise if I bored you senseless for the last 20 minutes, people, but I just randomly started thinking of other things. Well, there you are. That is, in fact, all I have to talk about this week. I hope you've all had a good week. I hope you've enjoyed what I'm spraffing on about. Let me know in the comments below, people, about any of that stuff I've just been talking about. I always love seeing your comments. I don't always get to respond to them straight away, but I always do. I always get round there eventually, even if it's a few days later. You'll always hear back from me one way or the other. So let me know in the comments below what you think about all of that, people. It's exciting times. I'm really excited about this year. You know, brand new consoles, loads of games coming. Even if it was just The Last of Us Part 2, I'd be uber stoked. But there you are. It has been an honour and a privilege serving for you in this vlog of mine, and I shall see you all next time. Take it easy, folks. Bye.